start at the beginning. As a young man, you grew up in a house filled with music. Your father is a musician. You were music obsessed. You were sports obsessed. But in reading your book, it takes a little while to get to the point where you become movie obsessed. And I'm wondering what your initial response was to films, what the first movies you saw were, and what was it about them that grabbed you as an art form?
Well, growing up, I mean, we all went to movies, but nobody ever thought of. We didn't know how movies got made. We just went to the movie theater and Saturday matinee, and we stayed there all day till our parents pulled us out of the theater. And it was just, you know, something to do. My mother was, she really loved films. My father hated films. He loved sports though. So I would always be my mother's date to see movies, but it was just to have fun. It wasn't until I went to college where I began to think about being a filmmaker. But before that, I didn't even know you could. That was even a possibility. Movies were there for pure entertainment, and that was it.
Did you think visually at all? Had you played around with the camera?
No. It was all sports. I mean, depending upon the season, stickball, stoop ball, punch ball, two-hand touch football, roller hockey, softball, basketball. On our block, that's all we did was play sports.
You've said before that you really miss the idea that kids don't get out in the street and play some of these games anymore.
Oh, there are a lot of the street games that we grew up playing. I mean, they're gone forever because now it's this shit. But kids you were active. I mean, I think that's the reason why this obesity is such a big problem in America. I mean, kids are plopped up in front of television. We were growing up, you know, you can stay in the house.
Okay.
You were out on the streets and being active. Also, across a lot of public schools in America, physical education been cut, art's been cut, music's been cut, so you have obese kids who know nothing about art or music. I'm a product of the New York City public school from kindergarten, high school, and you had to take an instrument. I played recorder and violin. You had, not good, but you had to play an instrument. You had to take art, and you had to take gym, which is my favorite class. And this is, I think, crippling the youth of America. They're fat. And you know, in 8 hours playing video games, that's just crazy.
8 hours playing video games can go by in a flash like that. You hear stories about people playing for days on end.
I mean, look, I'm not condemning the industry, but there's a thing called moderation. And as a parent, we've had to be very, my wife and I, we've had to be vigilant with our son, because that stuff can, you know, is moderation is the word, I would say.
Have you pushed him towards music, towards arts, or just sort of let him find his way?
No, he's graduated. Thank God, he's graduating high school May 31st, and he's going to NYU Film School, where his sister's already there. His sister, my daughter, she's finishing her sophomore year. So that's where I teach. I teach in the graduate film school. They're an undergrad.
Is it intimidating for your kids to have their dad, to go into filmmaking, have their dad be Spike Lee, have their dad be not only one of the renowned American filmmakers, but also a teacher at the school they're going to be in?
Well, they're an undergrad, so most of their students don't even know that. I mean, they don't go around advertising it. People ask them, they don't deny it. But I mean, they're very strong people, have their own identity, and they understand who their father and their mother is too. but they want to, make a place, make a stake in this world, on their own.
We'll go back again.
Yeah.
The King and I was a moment. You saw The King and I and apparently cried during the
No.
Yeah.
It was the movie, the play. She took me at a very young age, and I think we were sort of like Radio City Music Hall, and we were sitting at the top of the theater, and you had to climb steps, so it was just overwhelming. But I can see that my love of cinema was planted by my mother, by her taking me to films at an early age. Parents, we as parents cannot underestimate the influence we have on our children. And my mother was very, very, she saw that you can't really dictate what your children might be, but she had the vision that it was going to be her job to introduce us, not just myself, my siblings also, try to introduce us to as many things as possible, because you have a God-given gift and a certain field that's in you, but that whatever that is not introduced to you is not going to be fulfilled. So my mother, not just, again, my siblings too, my mother was dragging us to Broadway plays, museums, films, all types of stuff. She really wanted us to get an introduction to the arts.
I think in those days, going to the movies was something a little different too. You were going to movie palaces. You mentioned Radio City Music Hall. You saw one-screen theaters that were beautiful and ornate, and the idea of going to the movies was something that feels a little different perhaps than it does today. Mm-hmm. And perhaps, I know...
Here's a big thing. When we did Malcolm X, Ernest Dickerson, a great cinematographer, he's also my cinematographer at NYU. We both came at NYU together. We have a natural bond because he went to Howard, I went to Morehouse. Those are two historically black schools. And he shot all my films at NYU. Then he shot She's Gonna Have It, School Days, to I think Mo Better Blues, and Malcolm X. And while we were preparing for Malcolm X, we knew Malcolm X to be successful had to be an epic film. And so we looked at probably the best epic filmmaker there was David Lean. So we would see, there was a retrospective of David Lean's films, I think. So we were seeing Dr. Zhivago, Bridge River Choir, Lawrence Arabia, 70mm prints. And that's how we wanted Malcolm X to look. And it kills me today, because I'm going into my 4th generation of filmmaker, and so there's always a new generation that's being introduced to your work because they weren't born. But it kills me today that young people see Malcolm X on this, the first time. We worked too long. We didn't go to South Africa. We didn't go shoot on the Sahara Desert and all this stuff. We didn't shoot all around the world. For someone to see Malcolm X, it could be any look. I know BlackBerry's a Canadian. Where's the iPhone? All right. We did not make, of course, we couldn't see the future. Now, if you're on a plane, all right. But to see Malcolm X do the right thing on, or not just my films, to see Apocalypse Now, the first time, 2001, the first time you see in 2001 is on this. As a filmmaker, I know I might sound like a dinosaur, but that pains me. I mean, we filmmakers. I mean, we really spend years learning our craft. One of my most famous, one of the biggest epiphanies I ever had was I read an interview by Akira Kurosawa, the great master, Japanese filmmaker, and he was being interviewed for Ron. He was in New York at the time, and the guy who interviewed him said, "Is there any?" I think Kurosawa must have been like 85, 86 at the time, and the guy asked him, "You know, you're considered one of the greatest filmmakers ever, all time. Is there anything else that you need to learn?" And Kurosawa said, "There's a universe of cinema for me still to learn." So when I read that was epiphany. And for him to say that, it really made me think that, you know, as long as you're living, whatever you're doing, you have to work on your craft. And so, serious filmmakers, you know, we're not just throwing shit up there. And when you see, you're not gonna really see the craft on that. And I grew up, the best theater in New York is the Ziegfeld. And now, it's, you know, it's getting ready to close. And so, where are you going to see film like that on a big 70mm screen where these theaters will look like it's a palace? And things like, you know, 8-track, out of here. And I think it's sad.
Do you think the idea of Kurosawa's idea that he still has a universe to learn about film, is that why in your work you are so diverse in the kinds of projects that you take on? Because I think you have to...
But I don't think it has anything to do with subject matter. I think it has to do with that, to understand that, I bet you if you ask John Coltrane, Frank Sinatra, or any artist at level, they would say the same thing. That if you're at a point where you can start learning, then you're above ground. You know, you should always be open, you know, to keep growing and learning stuff, because unless you're the almighty, how can you know everything?
Is that idea one of the most important things that you can pass along to your students?
Oh yeah, I tell that to my students all the time. I've been a professor at New York University Graduate Film School for the last 15 years. This past summer, I finally got tenure. And I'm also artistic director of the film school, and that's one of the first things I say to my students. NYU Graduate Film School is a 3-year school, and I teach the third-year students who are preparing for the thesis film, and that's one of the things I'd say. The other thing I talk about is work ethic, because I don't want to sound like a dinosaur again, but not everybody, but these millennials, whatever you call them, you know, I don't blame them, but there's this whole fiction of overnight success, that you don't have to do any work, no elbow grease, no nothing, and just overnight the hand of God's come out of the sky, and you're going to be anointed the next one. And a lot has to do with these game shows too, and stuff like that, you know, and I think there's no substitute for hard work, where you just get out there, whatever it is you want to do, you got to bust your ass. There's no getting around that. And if you didn't do that, then whatever you achieve is really hollow, I think.
Do you show them the short films that you made before the features and say, this is...
No, I don't do that. I don't show the early work. No, a lot of times I show them the stuff I'm working on at the time. Like right now, I'm in post-production on a documentary and making a Michael Jackson Off the Wall album. I've previously done Bad 25. I saw the commercial I'm doing, so I try to, anything I'm doing currently, I let them be the first people to see it.
So we've got an idea of what you give to them. What do you take from the students?
Well, students would have once hit me to crowdfunding. I had never heard of crowdfunding. When you're in film school, you have to finance your own films, and a lot of my students were using Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and they're the ones that hit me to that. My students, along with my children, one that got me into social media. So there is, I think, if you're a good teacher, you gotta be good. If you're not, in my opinion, if you're not getting anything back from your students, you're not being the best teacher you can be, because it means they exchange. And the young people, that they let you know what's happening, what's hit.
The idea of crowdfunding is interesting to me because I think that it hooks you up with an audience that's interested in your work, that is pre-sold on the idea of your work. They're enthusiastic about it, and it's a really interesting and probably, in that element, new way of funding movies. But the idea that goes back to the way you raised money for Do the Right Thing and some of the early films in the 80s and early 90s.
Well, I think that the ideal of crowdsourcing is, I've used it way back before there was a thing called, the technology. Because for She's Gonna Have It, we wrote, remember that? We would put pen to paper,
Did you write it in
postcard.
longhand?
Yes. We would lick a stamp, phone calls, that's how we raised the money. With today, the technology makes you able to reach out and get a whole bunch of people. And the last film I did, The Sweet Blood of Jesus, was a Kickstarter film. We raised $1.4 million, on that. And as you said before, it connects you directly with the people who supported your film over the years. Someone just told me the other day that De La Soul raised $600,000 for their new album. So it's a great way to get new ideals. It's not just movies, it could be many different things. You go on, whatever, if you have a good ideal, people support it. People come out and support it. So I'm glad my students hit me to crowdsourcing.
Will you use it again?
I don't know. I don't think it's a thing that someone like myself can go to. You can't go to the well too often. But I don't like to never say never, but it was a great experience.
You mentioned Michael Jackson. You're working on the Off the Wall documentary. Bad 25 was a significant film. I loved watching that film. I thought I knew that album, and it turns out that I didn't, or I didn't certainly know the stories behind it. You worked with Michael Jackson. You shot a music video, or short film, I guess you would have called it.
He did not call them music videos.
Yeah.
He said, Spike, it's a short film. We're not making a music video. No, he was very, he would correct you.
Yeah.
Quick, with the quickness. You said music video.
And so you worked with him, and then you put this together. Tell me a little bit about your connection with Michael Jackson, because he was such a significant figure for so many people, but for you seem to have a real special spot for him.
Well, we grew up together. I mean, not physically, but I was born in 1957, he was born in 1958. Prince was born in 58 too. So we're black men, started as young black boys growing up in a very turbulent time in America, but we were born in the right age because we were right, a couple years earlier, we would have been in Vietnam. But we were still able to see the civil rights movement, everything that's happened in America, and it was just a great time to be born, so you could witness all this stuff happen. I think it impacted all of us, and I'm being very modest. I'm not trying to prove myself in that level of Prince and Michael Jackson, but it's great for me. I got to work with both of them. And, I think they're two great artists. And I miss Michael like everybody else does.
You shot the video. You shot there are two versions of it, right? In Brazil?
Yeah, there are two versions of it. They don't really care about us. One is the prison version. The other version we shot in Bahia and Rio de Janeiro.
And I love one of the stories because you did your Michael Jackson impression. And that's the voice that he used in public. That's the voice that we were most sort of familiar with his. But in fact, that wasn't his real voice.
Well, he liked the talk in a high register, but was not really his natural voice. And I remember there was one time on the set, someone said, "Spike, Spike, Spike." I turned around, it was Michael Jackson. I was having a heart attack. So he wanted something done, and we got it done.
Yeah, I think that people have a different idea. We tend to think of the artistic side of Michael Jackson, the craft of the dancing, of his incredible singing, of his songwriting ability. But he was very much a businessman. He was very much someone who understood what he wanted, and was, as the documentary about his last tour showed, someone who was a perfectionist in the way he worked with people.
He was a perfectionist and very open. What we did with that song, Didn't Really Care About Us, was not many artists would do, because at that time, Paul Simon's album, Rhythm of the Saints, was out. And that's how I got introduced to Ola Doom, the great Brazilian drum troupe. And so I said, Michael, he said, what do you want to do? I said, let's go to Brazil and let's get Ola Doom and play together with them. He said, okay. But most artists would have had Ola Doom playing to the track. But I said, no, Michael, let's have Ola Doom play on top with the track. Because a lot of times, whatever the record is, we're not changing it. We want the same thing that the record is, the video has to be that. But Michael was like very, very, very open. If you had a good idea, he said, let's do it. And he would listen to it. If you didn't like it, he said, we're not doing that. But we liked it. And when I said, let's go to Brazil, let's use Ola Doom, let's shoot in favela, he said, let's go. It wasn't a question of how much it's going to cost. And do I have to go call a record company? He said, pack your bags, we're going to Brazil. And it was on like that.
Did anyone ever say no to Michael Jackson? In terms of, if he said, I think I'd rather have...
Well, the Brazilian government tried to say no, because at first they didn't want to give us a visa. But that got shot down. But it was one of my most memorable experiences in film ever, going to Michael Jackson and doing that video. Here's another story people don't know. Who's ever seen that film, City of God?
Yeah.
Raise your hand. Yeah. Well, the favela where we shot, the video is where that film takes place. And this place, it's changed. It's sort of gentrified, but back in the day, the cops, the favelas are the hills all surrounding Rio, because if you got money, you're down on the beach. And that favela was a drug haven, lots of crime, and the cops don't even go up there. And there was one brother running things, so we had to make sure that everything was cool, because we can't put Michael Jackson in a dangerous, kind of situation. So I wasn't there, but we had somebody on behalf of the company meet the man that was running shit. And he's a huge Michael Jackson fan. He said, when Michael Jackson is here, this will be the safest place. The safest place on earth. You can leave, you're equipped, you can leave $1 million on these streets. No one's touching whatever the word for motherfucker is in Portuguese. He's ain't no motherfucking dollar. So, our person, after we left, started talking to this person about his life, and therefore, City of God came out of that. So Michael Jackson was responsible for City of God being made, and that's 100. That's not, I'm not lying. That's 100. I mean, so that's how. I mean, just him, his presence, just sparks a whole lot of stuff.
Well, there were ripples, right?
Ripples,
He
exactly.
seemed like someone that caused ripples and creative ripples. You were someone, you've worked with everybody. And you were someone I've heard has a curiosity when you're working with people. And you've said, if I'm feeling it, if I'm enjoying being with that person, I start asking questions. Prince, why did you start, Let's Go Crazy with Dearly Beloved? Why do you, and you have questions. What is that restless, creative energy coming out?
It's not energy. It's just that creativity, I think, is one of the greatest gifts that a human being can get. And when I feel something that's godlike, I don't know, like, where'd you get that, where did the ideal come from? Like Stevie. He still doesn't answer this question. Every time I see him ask this question, Stevie, in the middle living in for the city, why does the record stop? Skyscrapers and everything, and this whole thing, the state of New York sentenced you to 20 years.
Yes.
So I like to know where these great ideas come from, and most of the time they say it was God. It's not like they were the muse visits you, and these things just are blessed upon you, and they all say that you have to be open to it. You have to, your vessel, your soul, your spirit has to be open to it, because if you're closed, you're not getting that shit. It's not going to come to you. The great artists, they're open, so they're able to receive all these things. But it's not just musicians, painters, poets, whoever, however you express your art.
Do you ever feel that you have to learn how to do that? And I don't know if you can learn to be creative. I'm not sure if that's true.
No, I don't know if you could teach creativity.
But you can learn over time to be confident in your ability.
I think you can learn craft.
Yeah.
There's a difference between craft and creativity, and I think that to have creativity, they have to work together. I think you can be very creative, but if your craft is like shaky, it's not gonna. Same thing in sports. You'll be great athletic skills, but if your fundamentals are not right, then you're not gonna play. So it's a 1-2 punch.
Well, and I think what I'm getting at though is the idea of learning to embrace the mistakes, maybe, or learning to. Eric Clapton once said that his favorite moments in all his records were the unplanned moments, the moments that something didn't go quite right, but you listen back to it later. And
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a mistake though, because there are things that happen that you don't plan, but that's necessarily a mistake. That's something that's spontaneous. It's something that happened. If somebody says something wasn't scripted, that's not necessarily a mistake.
Did it take you a while to be confident enough to embrace everything that goes on? You started making films at a young age. You've made a lot of movies. You say you like to be challenged. You like to learn something every time out. If you could look back and talk to the Spike Lee that made Do the Right Thing, would you have a bit of advice for them?
I don't really deal with those hypothetical things because it can't happen. I can't go back to who I was at that age. So, you have to deal with who you are now and at the future. So I really can answer that question.
For a student, to tell them, we touched on this a little bit, but I guess maybe the same question, replacing yourself with a student that you might be teaching and saying, open yourself up to the idea of embracing things that can happen that aren't necessarily written on the page.
Well, I think that's something that, that most of my students know already. I think that when you're in film school, most of the time you're intimidated by actors, so you hide behind the camera and you're much more at ease with the camera. than working with actors. Working with actors can be intimidating. And when you're in film school, these actors, you know, the school has an agreement with SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, so these actors are working for free, and they know that once they get one day, once they shoot the first day, they can do whatever they want, because students don't have the money to reshoot them, so they just take the upper hand and boss, and to really take advantage of the students who are intimidated by actors who had a chance to work with actors before.
I remember the moment when I saw Do the Right Thing for the first time. I remember the theater I was in. I remember the opening scene of that, the
Rosie Perez.
Rosie Perez. And I was thinking of that moment, which made such an impression on me when I was watching The Sweet Blood of Jesus, the new film, because it opens not with a similar scene so much, but a similar idea, a similar thing. It felt like a big circle to me. I've read that you're very interested in the first moments of your film because you feel it sets the tone, you feel it grabs the audience. Just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the idea of really capturing the audience's imagination and attention right from the get-go.
Well, opening credits is very important to me. I think it's more than just a legal obligation to say who wrote it, who directed it, who starred in it, who paid the money for it to be made. So if we've tried to work knowing that you have to do that for the most times. Sometimes you can't have a cold opening. But we want to use that time because that's the introduction to the world you're trying to portray. And why not be productive and get the audience to get their mind attuned to what the rest 2 hours are going to be. Draw them in, and that's what we've tried to do. Not with Do the Right Thing. We did it with a lot of the opening credits: School Days, Mo Better Blues, 25th Hour, Jungle Fever. I mean, almost all the things we've done, we really think long and hard about the opening credits of the film. So it's like a manifesto, like this is what this film's going to be about.
How did you meet Rosie Perez? I've heard a couple of
you heard her story?
Yeah.
Well, I was in Los Angeles for my birthday, and there was a club that's no longer there called Funky Reggae. And at that time, School Days was out, and the #1 record, R&B record, was The Butt by this group called EU. Thank you. So we flew EU out from DC, because DC is home of go-go music, and they were playing The Butt, and Rosie was on the speaker dancing. And I told her to come down, because I did not want her to break her neck and then sue me on top of that. So she jumped off the speaker and started cursing me out in a Spanglish dialect, which I've never heard before. And then I asked her where she was from, and she said she's from Brooklyn. I said, where are you from? Brooklyn. She said, Fort Greene, which was the same neighborhood I'm from. And at that time, I was writing Do the Right Thing. And that's why I decided that Mookie's girlfriend should be Puerto Rican. Unlike a lot of other places in America, there is no static, no beef between black people, black Dominicans and black Puerto Ricans in New York City. Unlike black people and Mexicans in California or Texas. In New York, we grew up together, lived together. There's no friction between the two. I mean, a lot of intermarrying. It's just like, that's my people. So I wanted to demonstrate that by having Mookie's girl from Puerto Rico.
You still work in Fort Greene. Your office
Your
is
office
still there.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it for you to go there every day? Because you don't live there anymore, but you
I live
go
in Manhattan.
there every day.
Well, more is going to be from Brooklyn. I mean, I don't care where. I mean, Woody Allen's still from Brooklyn. He has lived in Brooklyn many years. Jay-Z also. But there's this amazing thing about Brooklyn that so often comes up is there's something in the water with the amount of people come out of Brooklyn. Lena Horne, Biggie, we go on and on and on, you know, but Brooklyn's in the house no matter where you go in the world.
What do you think it is?
I don't have a explanation for that yet, but it's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence.
Robert De Niro was someone that you considered for Do the Right Thing, and
I mean, he was offered the role.
He was offered the role.
Right.
And you have said, you know, absolutely no disrespect, but you were glad in retrospect that he didn't end up in the film. Can you tell us why?
Well, Robert De Niro is one of the greatest actors ever. But Do the Right Thing was conceived as an ensemble piece. And when you have a star of that magnitude put into an ensemble piece, it goes out of balance. And it's happened to me, I've seen it happen many other times, where the person who was initially thought to be that person, to get that role, whatever reasons, doesn't do it, and the person who comes in was that person. So sometimes it takes, you know, your first intuition, not necessarily the one that's going to turn out to be the best. So, and that we should mention, that was Danny Aiello.
Yeah.
Danny, who won an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor, lost out to Denzel for Denzel's performance in Glory.
How do you deal with the pressure of expectations when you have a new project in the works or one in release, or do you not feel the pressure? Do you not care?
Oh, I'd care, but no one could put more pressure on me than myself. So, I mean, this is not especially filmmaking, you know, this is no joke out here. And unlike a lot of other art forms, you know, it is fueled by money, and it takes a lot of money to get this thing going. It's not just like a canvas and some paint, not to negate the great art that's come from those tools, but it's a different art form, and it takes a lot of money, you know, to see it up on screen.
A film like The Sweet Blood of Jesus, which cost $1.4 million to make, you know, by contrast, some of the studio films would cost 30 times that. You know, a lot more money than that. Do you work differently, other than the money? Is there a different style of working?
No, not at all. You know, we're not going to change the way we work. We're going to have shorter days. You know, probably not have any big names, but it doesn't dictate to how we make the film. You know, we have to make it smarter. You have to make the money last longer, but it's not a radical change in overall of the filmmaking style.
When you were starting out, you cast yourself in a lot of films, and you seem to have backed off that a little bit.
Oh, a lot.
And why? Why don't you so much anymore? I love seeing you on the screen. Why?
The only reason I was in She's Gonna Have It because we didn't have money to pay anybody else, and you never know how these things work. Mars Blackman loves Air Jordans, and two guys at White & Kennedy, Nike's advertising agency, Jim Riswell and Bill Davenport, see the film, love it, call me up, say we want you to do these commercials with Michael Jordan, want you to direct them, want you to recreate your character of Mars Blackman, want you to be in black and white, but it's not a go yet because Michael has the final say, and he doesn't know who you are, and he hadn't seen your film. And it wasn't until this past Valentine's Day weekend, which also coincided with the NBA All-Star weekend in New York, in Brooklyn, and split between the Knicks and the Nets, that I've been wanting to ask Michael this question almost, we'll say 20 years. So I finally got the courage and said, Michael, why did you choose me to direct these commercials? Because he could have chosen a lot of the big time, Joe Pickett, Bob Garaldi, these are guys who were doing a ton of commercials, who were the top of the commercial directors on Madison Avenue. And Michael just looked at me and smiled and said, because you're wearing my sneakers. And that's how I got into advertising. That was not the plan. Mars was a b-boy, and Mars was going to wear the hippest stuff.
Yeah.
And Mars, I mean, even if you remember the film She's a Habit, in the scene where he's making love to Nola Darling, he kept his Jordans on, didn't even take his Jordans off. So that's how that happened.
I think, there are just a very small handful of directors that the general public will look at a name and say, you know what, rather than say, oh, I'm going to go see The Sweet Blood of Jesus, they're going to say, I'm going to go see the new Spike Lee film. It happens with Spielberg, it happens with Scorsese, it happens with maybe a small handful of other people, and you're one of those people. Do you think that those ads and the idea that you were in those films, making yourself a much more public person than a lot of other directors, has been a benefit in that way?
Well, it helped, but a lot of people still don't even know I make films. They just know the guy that goes to Knicks games, It's guys on the sidelines. So, but I really have no control over that. People are going to see how they see it.
What's it like to be courtside?
It's the best seat.
None of us will ever be able to do it.
Best seat in the house. I didn't go to a lot of games this year, though. Why are you laughing?
We'll turn it over for questions from the audience. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Karen Bliss. I actually interviewed you, I think it was a round table during TIFF when you were here for Bath 25, and you talked about with that film, it actually showed his perfectionism, but you kind of wanted to change what's become his legacy so that, the general public sees his art more. And did you achieve that? And can you also talk about the new doc that you're working on, and if you have archival footage and what the focus is and everything?
Thank you for the question. I mean, that was the goal of Bad 25, to focus on Michael's genius, focus on musicianship, not all the other stuff. I think that we achieved that. And working on Off the Wall is amazing. The first 3 albums that Michael did with the great Quincy Jones, and God willing, we'll get to do the 3rd, which will be Thriller. So that'll be a wonderful trilogy. Well, it's kind of different archival footage because this takes place in Michael's become an adult solo artist, but still perform with his brothers. The 2 albums he did with Gamble and Huff, that stuff.
I need your real, honest answer here. Do you think that
Depends on the question.
Do you think that the Knicks will make the playoffs next year?
Yeah. Hey, if we make the playoffs, we're not getting swept the first round. Where's Drake at?
It's a good thing.
Where's the ambassador? Where you at?
Spike, I've been a fan since She's Gotta Have It,
Thank you.
and I've always seen you, as much as your films have been about so many different subjects, to me you're essentially a musical director. I think of the dance scene in School Days, I think of the incredible dance hall scene in Malcolm X, and the amazing dancing in Bamboozle. I'm a jazz guy. You ever gonna do a film about jazz, a film more about music, like More Better Blues?
I would like to. Now, we get Denzel in it, that's definitely getting made. But I would like to revisit jazz in the film. Thank you.
Spike, you're not gonna like me because I'm a Bulls fan, and it's
So I like that shot that hit last night. Anybody see the game last night?
D Rose is back.
D Rose hit the shot. No one seen it? You don't know basketball here? 3-pointer at the buzzer. Banked it in.
Unbelievable. Stop.
Oh, you got to call it.
But I'm also an A&R guy for RCA Records, and whenever I watch your movies, I think that you are like one of the best A&R people for finding actors that you really don't know, and then they come on to become really big actors later on. Now, do you find these actors yourself and pick them for your movies?
I've had the great honor of having wonderful casting directors, Robbie Reed, Kim Coleman, who helped me find people. Because what we try to do is that we try to save 3 or 4 roles for newcomers. There is no dearth of talent. Music, film. The thing is, there are not enough roles. And no matter how much talent you have, if you don't get the opportunity, the platform, the vehicle to display your talent, the world's not get to see it. So, if you look at School Days, that's Teacher Campbell's first film, Jasmine Guy's first film, Do the Right Thing was Rosie Perez's first film, Martin Lawrence's first film, Robert Harris's first film, Jungle Fever was Queen Latifah's first film, Halle Berry's first film, Clock was Mekhi Phifer's first film. So we really, it's a great feeling when you're able to thrust talented people, into the world so they can do their thing.
And is that Chirac movie a go?
Oh, is it what?
The Chirac movie.
Well, we had a general casting call today in Chicago where people lined up around the block, so.
Hi, I'm a Brazilian. I'm from Rio, and my dad's from Bahia. So thanks a lot for that story. We always we do love that movie, and that story was great. But I have one question though. Why not show your students your early work and how you have progressed from your early work to where you are today?
They can't learn from that stuff. The mistakes in my film, they don't need to see them because they're more advanced than where I was.
Hi, my name's Tyrone. I just wanted to...
Tyrone?
Yeah.
You get kidded about that name a lot, right?
Pardon me?
Go ahead, ask.
I just wanted to know your views on the growing violence in America from police and what that means to America as a whole, because I think it's more of a growing issue of militarization in the police state and oppression against Americans as a whole. So I just wanted to know if you plan to document that in film or something.
Very good question. This whole stuff is not new. People have cameras. We saw with Rodney King. Everybody now has a phone that can record something. And now people are capturing it. We saw with Eric Gardner in Staten Island, which is the same exact chokehold we saw in Do the Right Thing, Ray Rahim. We saw in South Carolina. We've seen it in Baltimore. And so, please not believe that this is a phenomenon that all of a sudden is sweeping America. Now it's just being caught with everybody now with the camera is a photojournalist. But here's the thing though, even with footage, those cops in New York City got off with the stranglehold of Eric Gardner. So that's not Remember, those cops, people forget this. The Rodney King cops, when that trial got moved to Simi Valley, they got off. And you saw what happened in LA after that. So this stuff is not new. Baltimore is not new. We saw that in Simi Valley, with Simi Valley verdict. And let's see what's gonna happen. It's gonna be this summer, it might be on this summer. I'm not up here trying to start no shit. And last I'm gonna say, this is not just about African Americans. When we saw what happened in Ferguson, they were all over. It was black, white, Hispanic, Asian. Everybody was taken to the streets. Not just in America, overseas also. So don't get tricked in. Don't go for the okie doke that there's something that only black people concern. I think we are all concerned anytime people lose their lives over some bullshit. Not just a black thing. And also, I promise for my white Torontonians, what's the word? Torontonians? Well, in Brooklyn, anyway. Do not get offended by Black Lives Matter. That's not to say white lives don't matter. The same way people, Black Power. It's come back a little bit. Black Lives Matter is not an offense to white people. And I was out several nights. I was out marching in New York, and I saw young white kids hang with signs of Black Lives Matter. The thing is that it seems now that there is less value put on black lives. Now, I said before, this thing's happened forever, back to lynchings. But now with cameras, it's being brought to the public now more than ever. I want to thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Canadian News Week. Thank you very much. Thank you.